Welcome to the world of probiotic foods. This is Cultured Food Life with your host, Donna Schwenk.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining me this week. And we're going to be talking about fermented foods and IBS. And it's really become kind of an epidemic. As I've seen in the last few years, it seems like more and more people are having problems with things like leaky gut syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome, which is IBS. And IBS is usually identified as a group of symptoms, which things like abdominal pain, bloating, change in bowels that can alter between diarrhea and constipation. And my daughter's own story of healing from IBS was many years ago, was one that really made me a believer in the power of probiotic foods. She had multiple food allergies and she had IBS. And by having a cultured food at every meal and some prebiotics, she healed her gut and her IBS. And it was really an amazing thing to see. And this was 18, 19 years ago. And scientists talk about the connection between having lots of good microbiome and a healthy gut and IBS. And a study that was done in 2014 looked at 28 people suffering from IBS. Some of the participants were asked to consume a fermented milk product like kefir for 4 weeks, while others served as a control group. Those consuming the drink, researchers saw an increase in their bacteria that produce butyrate, an acid that is really, really beneficial for gut health and for so many things in the body. And in response, the symptoms of their IBS improved, while the symptoms of the people in the control group remained the same. So the conclusion drawn at this study mirrors those of studies done in other studies. One of these was done in 2009 with 34 participants. And then it was another study done in Norway compared 3 groups, 2 composed of people who were suffering from IBS and 1 with subjects who had no IBS. One of the IBS groups was given dietary advice and the other 2 groups didn't receive any advice. Many people who have IBS avoid dairy because it causes their symptoms to flare up. But the people in the IBS group who got advice were told to consume fermented milk products, things like kefir, yogurt, and they have the ones that had probiotics in them. That's what the type of fermented milks they were told to drink. And interestingly enough, the people who consumed the most fermented dairy did significantly better than all their counterparts. They reported an improvement in their quality of life and a reduction of abdominal pain, which is the same thing that happened to my daughter. She had a ton of kefir in her diet when she was healing. And it was something I think she had every morning. Sometimes she had it twice a day. And I was really on a mission to help her repair her symptoms because she experienced pain every time she ate, no matter what it was. And there was just not very much help from the medical community because they didn't know why she had these symptoms. But I took her to a doctor. He said we could take out her gallbladder, but he wasn't sure that was what it was. Well, that upset me because it's surgery and I didn't want to do that if it wasn't necessary. So I started searching for answers, and that's when I discovered cultured foods, their ability to repair the microbiome and help restore their health and fix that gut lining that is damaged and leaking. When I researched the foods that hurt her gut the most, I eliminated them from her diet. But that was only a temporary fix. That didn't really fix the problem that was underlying everything. And so here's what I found this was the reasons I believe that she was having so much trouble with her gut. First of all, her gut lining was damaged. Years of antibiotics, and she had a lot of antibiotics because she had a lot of sinus infections, and they had stripped her of her good bacteria. And then she was under a tremendous amount of stress. She was having a breakup with one of her boyfriends, and certain foods she was eating, they didn't have the nutrient-dense vitamins and minerals that they needed to help her to heal. And it was destroying her gut lining by not eating healthy foods, being under stress, taking antibiotics, an overload of them. And the lack of proper good bacteria to turn her food into vitamins and fatty acids was causing her gut to change. There was nothing to protect her gut lining because she wasn't eating a proper diet. She had been on an extremely low-carb diet for several years. Her microbes were in dire need of fiber in the form of things like fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains. That's what your microbiome needs. Those microbes need those things to thrive and grow. She was eating under 30 carbs a day and basically just starving her microbes. And she was also taking antibiotics. And when your microbes don't have any food, this causes the pH in your gut to shift. And that shift can favor the growth of less healthy, negative endotoxin producing gut bacteria. And it reduces the growth of positive bacteria that's more healthy for your gut. The American Gut Project states a pH shift prospects for opportunistic pathogens increase, as do opportunities for gram-negative bacteria like Endobacter and other bacteria that can cause the bacteria to be less good bacteria and much more harmful bacteria. So when you add all this up, she had a recipe for disaster. She was lacking fiber in her diet. She was under stress. She was taking antibiotics. She wasn't eating nutrient-dense foods, and it was the perfect storm. And she was a perfectly normal teenager before all this with no food allergies, none of those problems with her gut, and then all of that changed when she started doing those things. So we started to give her a cultured food at every meal, and she got lots of prebiotic fibers, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of healthy drinks that had things like kombucha, coconut water, kefir. She did a lot of that. And it wasn't very long. It took about 3 weeks for her stomach to quit hurting after she ate. And then about a month later, she started to be able to eat food she hadn't eaten before that she had been allergic to. And then in a year, she could eat anything. It was pretty amazing. And researchers at New York's University Medical Center made really exciting discoveries regarding food allergies and intestinal bacteria. Not only did they discover why children develop food allergies, but they also found a way to solve it. The study, which was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found that young children who were given too many antibiotics early on were at a greater risk of developing food allergies. The researchers identified naturally occurring bacteria in the human gut that keeps people from developing food allergies. But if these bacteria are killed by antibiotics early in life, children become more susceptible to allergies later on. And I have seen this a lot in my line of work with people. And there's a lot of studies that support this now. This was just one of many studies that supports this. The scientists tested this theory by feeding antibiotics to young mice and found they were developed a peanut sensitivity allergy. But when the young mice were given the good bacteria, Colostria, a very diverse group of bacteria, has like 100 species in it, like magic, their allergies vanished. And many more studies are confirming this. I see it all the time. For years, I didn't know why Macy began to heal when she started having cultured foods at every meal. But it was working so well, I just didn't want to stop. And then I would tell my friends about it because their kids were studying the food allergies, and they would get better. And that was 18, 19 years ago. And fast forward years later, and science caught up. It explained the magic behind cultured foods. It's restoring the gut bacteria that were missing or killed through the antibiotics. And not that I'm against antibiotics. I think sometimes they're necessary. I do think you need to replenish your good bacteria in your body once you take them, because it's just so essential to have all the right ones in there. And you can do that through fermented foods much, 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 much better than supplements, because it's the preferred method for the body, because it's transported through a food. It doesn't get killed in the stomach acids. It speeds to the part of the body where it's needed, and it goes to the right parts of the body instead of opening up in places like supplements can do where they don't belong. Now, one of the things that have been developed for those who suffer from SIBO and IBSO is the FODMAP diet. And we all know the food choices can drastically change your health. So when they developed these diets, it was no surprise that it really helped people. The Professor Peter Gibson at the Monash University in Melbourne developed this diet to alleviate symptoms of IBS and ease discomfort. When it comes to this diet, avoiding a lot of foods, it causes the symptoms to be temporarily better. It doesn't heal the problem. It just helps things to be easier on you. It does reduce gas, bloating, and cramping, but you have so many lists of food that you shouldn't have. And there's just a long list of things that that you need to eliminate. And so it can be very problematic because here's the thing, whenever you have something like this, you want to know why you got it. What happened that caused you to get these problems in the first place? So just masking the symptoms doesn't fix the problem, and you really want to fix the problem. And there's a lot of research that shows that they need to change the microbiome in ways to liberalize these dairy restrictions. So FODMAP is an acronym that stands for fermentable oleosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polys that are carbohydrates that sometimes can cause gas, bloating, and disruption of the sensitive individuals that have these kind of they have this kind of IBS, or they have food allergies. There's just a list of things that can happen with this. And without the proper gut flora, like I said before, you can have things like SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And it's just a long list. And you really want to address what's causing these problems to begin with. It helps to eliminate some of the foods that are causing the distress, but long term, we want to fix the problem. So let's think about your gut. It's like a rainforest, and it contains thousands of different microbial species. Most of them are still unknown to us. We don't know all of them. And it's funny because they keep finding more and more significant species in our guts that we don't know about that are really doing tremendous amounts of health promoting benefits in our guts, but we just don't know them. So things like Akkermansia municipilia is so important for our guts. It's the major thing that keeps our gut lining intact. And they just discovered that, let's see, I can't remember when that was. It wasn't too long ago. And it's a major factor in our gut. It makes up 1/4 of our gut bacteria. So adding probiotic-rich cultured foods, such as cultured vegetables, kefir, and other things to help rebuild the flora is needed, but it needs to be done with caution because so many people are sensitive to any type of food that can ferment in the gut. So when you have all of these problems, you kind of have to think of yourself as a park ranger for your gut. If your gut microbiome is healthy, you want to continue to support those beneficial microbes with foods that enhance the flora and inhibit the growth of pathogenic microbes and fungi by limiting the food sources in the beginning. And in this way, you will help strengthen your ecosystem and avoid major disruptances. Antibiotics or foods and drugs that can harm the balance should be avoided if at all possible. And if you are a park ranger of your gut ecosystem, that it is in need of repair. So first of all, you need to ask yourself some questions. Have I been taking a lot of antibiotics or overconsumption of processed foods that will harm my gut? What are the species in my gut that I'm relying on? How stable is my system? How many prebiotic foods, how many fibers am I feeding my microbes? And chances are you're out of whack. And I have a great article called FODMAP and Cultured Foods, and it gives you specific probiotic foods that don't seem to cause the distress to your microbiome or to your gut that are easier on you. Things like rice kefir that seem to have a milder effect on the body than regular kefir. And slowly, as you try these foods, purple kraut, that seems to do really well. It's a part of the FODMAP diet. All of these things that will teach you how to have a probiotic food that will heal your gut, but without the symptoms. And I'll link that in the description below. In my experience with my daughter and countless others who've had IBS, adding fermented foods and a few other things is one of the things that can speed you on your way to recovery. Because you don't want complete elimination of foods that make you react. You want to find foods that don't make you react, but still have probiotics in them. So what we did with my daughter was we gave her a cultured food at every meal. So for instance, she had kefir for breakfast. She had a smoothie. She had a couple tablespoons of juice from cultured vegetables. And she had a lot of soups because the bone broth is very healing to the gut. That helped repair her gut lining. She had like 1 tablespoon of the juice, or she had a spoonful of the kraut at lunch with a meal. She had miso soup. I made her a lot of different types of soups and things that she found really healing. She had kombucha, coconut water, kefir with every lunch and dinner she had, and cultured vegetables again at dinner. she really worked really hard at this, and she had a lot of fermented cabbage. They say purple cabbage works the best for people with IBS. She did fine with green cabbage too, but that just depends. You're going to have to pay attention to what works best for you. Like for instance, sauerkraut made from green cabbage can be high on the FODMAP diet, and that is due to the amount of mannitol, which is sugar alcohol, in cabbage, and it belongs in the poly group, which is a acronym on the FODMAP diet. And red cabbage is fermented as low to moderate on the FODMAP diet. It doesn't have as many of those types of sugar alcohols, and it ferments differently. It works really, really well, but only if you want, you can just do the juice. The juice is just as strong as the vegetables themselves, so that might be an option for you too. Kefir was something she had every single day. She had a smoothie every single day, but there are many different types of kefir. I have like 16 different non-dairy kefirs you can choose from. Lactose is high on the FODMAP diet, but when you ferment kefir, it becomes 99.9% lactose free. But it removes all the lactose. But there are I've got 16 other different types of non-dairy kefir if you want to try those and think you might do better with them. Rice kefir tends to work really good for people who have a lot of problems with IBS. Goat's milk kefir is one of the very best of all of them too, that works really well in the FODMAP because it's very different than regular dairy milk. It's much less allergic. It has different types of proteins in it. And there's a protein in cow's milk called alpha-1 casein. Many individuals are very allergic to that, but not all cows produce A1 casein. The milk from A2 cows produces none of these inflammatory effects like the A1 casein does. And they sell A2 milks at the grocery stores now. I see it everywhere. I use it all the time. I love it to make yogurt with. And also goat's milk primarily only has A2 caseins in it. So that makes it the closest thing that you can get to human breast milk. And goat's milk kefir is absolutely delicious. So that's another alternative. Coconut kefir, also low on the FODMAP, gives you lots of probiotics as well. I've seen a lot of people heal on coconut kefir. But here's the deal. Start with a few spoonfuls of kefir at a meal and see how you do. And then slowly build up as you get better. But all of these are great options if you are trying to heal IBS. These are the ones we did all the time. Now, sourdough bread, according to the Monash University, the levels of fructans in sourdough bread are greatly reduced during sourdough fermentation. That's because the yeast ferment the fructans during the natural leavening process while the bread rises. Typically, the dough should be allowed to rise for 12 hours, which is what my recipes do. And you'll find it really breaks down the bread. Now, here's something to notice. My daughter did very well on sourdough breads or sprouted breads, but she did not do well with regular bread. She's very allergic to it. But that really depends on you. Some people do fine, others don't. So if you don't, you can just leave it out altogether. But if you want to try it, she did really well. Einkorn bread, sourdough bread is really good for people who have gluten problems. But again, you have to really test yourself to see if you can digest it. She did, but not everybody does. So it depends on how messed up your microbiome is. Now, kombucha was something she had every day. S. boulardii, which is in kombucha, treats all kinds of bowel diseases from C. diff, acute diarrhea, antibiotic-associated diarrhea, and some parasitic forms of diarrhea and other gastrointestinal disorders. It's a powerful probiotic that's in kombucha. And my daughter has found kombucha to be of great help with IBS. It made such a big deal for her because she loved it. And she'd have 4 to 6 ounces with a meal. She had the plain version. She didn't do the fruit flavored ones because it was back in the day when we didn't really have those. And she loved it. And she just did plain kombucha and did very, very well with it. But again, listen to your body, see how you do with it, see if you can handle it. And it gave her a lot of probiotics that she needed. Another thing that I mentioned earlier, apples and apple peel powder really helps heal the gut lining. Akkermansia municipalia is a specific bacteria in our guts that is responsible for maintaining our gut lining and has many wonderful health benefits. Our gut lining keeps us protected from the outside world. So if you've got IBS, then your gut lining is damaged and leaking, and it causes all kinds of havoc. Apple peels or apple peel powder is the perfect food for akkermansia. It is the one thing it loves the most, and it feeds it in a super powerful way. It keeps your micro thriving, because what happens is it's kind of like a friend and foe, akkermansia, because it eats the mucus off your gut lining, but if you don't have enough fiber in your diet, it starts to eat the gut lining. So that's what happened, I think, to Macy, is that she didn't have the fibers in her diet that her akkermansia needed, so it started to eat itself, and that caused leaky gut syndrome. So you want to make sure you feel that apple peels is a great way to do it. Other fibers, berries, loves berries. It loves all kinds of fiber. So that's a really important one to do, is to strengthen your gut lining with apple peels or apple peel powder, which I put in my kefir smoothie every day. I love it. It tastes great. It's just a way to, because so many people are taking things like anti-inflammatory, like ibuprofen, things like that, and that can be hard on your gut lining. So make sure you have some apple peel or apples or apple peel powder in your diet all the time to help keep that gut lining intact and to keep it from leaking. Now, miso soup was another thing that Macy had a lot. It's a fermented soy, but fermented soy is much different than regular soy because it's loaded with enzymes and microbes. And there are so many microbes in miso that scientists haven't isolated them all yet. So you get a lot of B vitamins in miso, which helps to repair your gut, which is really important for your body when it's healing. And when you get those bunch of B vitamins, it's likely increased from the lactic acid bacteria that you're eating. This will boost your immune system, strengthen your microbiome, give you delicious food. It's very healing to the gut, and it's super easy to make, and I have lots of recipes for it. Now, Macy also took prebiotics. She drank special teas that helped her. And at the time, I didn't know these teas were prebiotic, but she loved them, and they really helped her a lot. Things like they had dandelion root, chicory root, things like taquino, these all different kinds of teas that had barley root. All of those are prebiotic fibers, and she had a lot of them. And I'm going to list the link to the ones that she had in this article in the description below so you can find them. But she did have them almost every day. Another thing that really helps is taking enzymes if you've got IBS. It helps regulate the chemical reaction the body uses to digest food. It helps to break down the food into nutrient pieces that are small enough to be absorbed into the bloodstream and carried throughout the body. And digestive enzymes really help break up fats, carbohydrates, protein, and you're struggling if you have IBS. And this can help promote a healthy digestion, relieve symptoms of IBS. And I have some enzymes that I recommend, but you can get enzymes really anywhere, but it really can make a difference for you. So these are some of the things that have helped my daughter when she was healing, and for so many people that I've helped through my website, through my books, and through classes, things like that. A lot of people found healing, restore your gut microbiome, and everything kind of takes care of itself. So I hope this helps you, and I hope you'll include some of these foods just slowly into your diet, but always pay attention to your own responses to your own body and see how you do, because everybody's different and everybody needs to go at their own pace, but I have a ton of suggestions. So thanks for listening, guys. You have a great week, and we'll see you next time.